we lost anybody during the recess, so we're back in regular session. So call the next item, Madam Clerk. Information items, I believe.
Information calendar. Would you like me to read the items into the record?
No, I don't think, unless there's any item on the information calendar, anyone on the board wish to comment or question any of those items, including financial reports and investment reports, and I have no one sign up from the audience. Okay, I think that'll be sufficient, so we'll go to our consent calendar.
May I just interrupt for
Yes.
1 minute? And I just want to point out that our passport service this year netted over $100,000, and that's being open 20 hours a week. So I have to really give credit to Jessica Jupitus and her staff, as well as the great people of our region who get their passports through the library, because this really helps us buy books.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
Thank you.
So you get the shingle out there, come get your passport at the library. Holy smokes. All right. And Johnny, thank you for your reports. You didn't get any questions, so I guess that's a good thing. So. That's great there. Okay. All right. So no action needed on those, and then we'll go to consent calendar. Items 7.1 through 7.7. Is there any member of this board wish to pull any item off the consent calendar? All right. We have a motion.
Motion.
And second. Okay. We have a motion by Ashby, seconded by Soon. I don't have anybody signed up. Is there anyone wish to address any item on the consent calendar? All right. Seeing none, then I'll just call for a voice vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Any recusals? Hearing none, and it's unanimous. All right. Madam Clerk, you're going to call the action item, please.
Action 8.1, fiscal year 2017-2018, final budget, position control update, and fine and fee structure. You should have two handouts, and I think the way I have them queued up is the 5-year forecast is first, and then the budget itself will be second.
Okay. Thank you, Linda. Okay, Rivka and Johnny.
Okay. We were going to do it the other way, but we'll be dynamic, won't we, Johnny? So, all right, there we go. This is all information that I think all of you who've been on the board for a while, and even the new people, know by heart. And those of you especially who were on the Budget Audit Committee are familiar with where our funding comes from. And in the interest of time, we're not going to repeat this. You know we cost allocate. You know approximately 55% of the budget comes from the county. 40%.
Yeah.
It's on page 222 of your packets. Under two major sources of funding. Are we in the right place?
Yes.
Okay, good. And you know that the City of Sacramento contributions come from the general fund, as well as two parcel tax measures. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Johnny for a little bit of analysis on the 5-year projections of our City of Sacramento funding.
Okay, so again, in the interest of time, we're not going to go through all the numbers. So I'm just going to highlight some important numbers to look at. So we started with the audited financial statement, so fiscal year 16, where it says actual. So these are audited numbers. So the estimate fiscal year 16-17, we're actually going through the audit right now as we speak. Our auditors are on site for the audit. So the current year budget is FY 17-18. So we're looking at a combined city general fund balance of $6.8 million once we close the books. So the next 5 years out, these are the numbers that we wanted to highlight. So the general fund combined with the parcel taxes, Measure X, Measure B, again, it's, no matter how we balance the budget, we're still looking at a structural deficit. So if you look at FY 18-19, we're looking at a structural deficit of almost 1.2 million. The numbers in the red towards the bottom. And then as we move towards the right, again, each year we're operating at a structural deficit, meaning that our revenue projections are coming in lower than expenditure projections. On average, and this is including the City of Sacramento's step-up increase that we've been working with Lainey Milstein and her staff with the City Council, the Sacramento City Council. Even with the step-up increase, we're still showing a structural deficit of close to $6 million in year 5. So we'll wrap back to this schedule towards the end, and we'll kind of talk about some plans on how we can hopefully shore up the deficit.
Okay.
Okay. You want to talk about the next page, or shall we move on?
Yeah, this one's just really quick. This is the city general fund, so we call it Fund 202. Again, the general fund contribution that we get from the City of Sacramento. Parcel Tax X sunsetting, as you know, Measure X is scheduled or slated to sunset this fiscal year, so June 30, 2018. So that's the reason why we show a fund balance of 0 at the end of the fiscal year. So the plan is we'll fully spend all the fund balance in Measure X, the sunsetting measure, and then in FY19, we'll start budgeting. This is also known as the Parcel Tax X renewal. So in FY19, we'll start budgeting in Fund 205, which is kind of, in a sense, picking up where 203 left off, and then we're moving on.
And
the new parcel.
Just to refresh everybody's memory, the new Measure X, which was passed in June of 2016, provides language that's a little more flexible regarding library operations. And so that's why the old fund is being sunsetted and spent out, and the new fund is being implemented. And
the Parcel Tax B, also known as Fund 204. Again, this is for core library services. And once again, looking at, starting with FY19, a structural deficit of 28,000, 68, 111,000, and so on. So this is a simple graph that we put together, and mainly it just simply shows our revenue sources are being outpaced by expenditures. So on average, again, we're seeing an increase of about 3% in revenue increase and approximately 5 to 6% in expenditure increases. So,
and those expenditures are labor costs, step increases that are mandated by contract, the increasing cost of doing business, because while many businesses have come out of the Great Recession, they're raising their prices, and we get to pay those increased prices. So there's just a gap that is a piece of the current reality.
And another big part of that increase is, as you all know from your respective agencies, CalPERS revised the discounted rate. So in 5 years, we're projecting to see a cumulative increase of approximately $2 million in additional employee contributions. So that all goes into the expenditure projection and analysis that we have in here.
And the next page is my favorite page, because I think it illustrates really well sort of what the issue is regarding the structural deficit. If you'll look, and I really thank Johnny for coming up with this. If you look at the very bottom, it highlighted in yellow, the $1,800,000. That's, I think you put that in there just to show, well, if we had that additional contribution, we wouldn't be at a deficit. That actually also coincidentally is the cost pretty close of operating 3 new libraries that were built and opened in 2009 and 10 without the funds to operate them. So we've been playing catch-up all of these years.
Yeah, and this is the message that Denise Davis, the former assistant library director, had conveyed to the board, over the last 6 years. So essentially the 3 new branches, it's approximately $600,000 per branch to operate. So if there was a way to come up with $1.8 million in hopefully general fund contribution from the City of Sacramento, this would surely help us shore up the structural deficit. So we're looking at, almost $6 million in structural deficit in 5 years. And if we were to start now instead of waiting until year 5, coming up with the additional $1.8 million, so in 5 years we'll have the $6 million less the $9 million contribution, so hopefully a positive $3 million in fund balance. So I mean, that's really not a whole lot, but it will certainly help with the library operations.
Director Ashby.
I want to mention that we are doing a budget workshop with the City Council on October 17th. We'll be telling this story and some other stories, because even this, just if the stars aligned and this all works out for us to have a balanced budget, it's where we are. It's not where we need to be as a library system. We look at the good work that's done in our county libraries that have 2 youth services librarians, for example. And I look at something like North Natoma's summer reading as a great example. Heather Bratt is one person, and she does an extraordinary job. If there were youth services, if she had a partner, she could visit more schools. She could have a bigger impact. And that is true in so many of our locations around the city, where we either share a youth services librarian, or we don't have one at all, or we don't have enough staff to open additional hours. So this is all information that we need to share about how we would like to operate and what our reality is.
Thank you, Chair Natoli. First of all, I'm not sure I would concede that Heather Bratt is one person. I'm not convinced of that quite yet. But clearly there is a city, we being Rivka and I and others who have worked on this for a while, knew that we were narrowing in on this gap. This gap was much larger 5 years ago and much scarier prior to B and X. So what we've really been trying to do is hone in on what is that gap that the general fund needs to get to, and how do we achieve it. And when the city passed Measure U, we were able to take one step back towards this. We had taken steps backwards, so really we just got back to where we were. And then X and B allowed us to close it up a little bit more. In addition to you coming on the 17th, Councilmember Jennings, Chenier, and I are all on the Budget and Audit Committee, and I believe we're going to receive a presentation from Lainey Milstein on the 3rd that will start to talk about how we ramp up to address this deficit. And in the next, 6 to 18 months, the City of Sacramento is having discussions about the renewal of Measure U and what that looks like, and how the library plays into that is something that I would encourage this body to pay attention to, and Rivka and Johnny in particular to stay engaged in those conversations, which I know you will. But right now the city is trying to determine what that Measure U, just like we did with X, would look like on a renewal. What would be included, how would the language differ a bit, and how that might assist us in meeting this 1.8 million annual gap moving forward is probably a discussion that is relevant right now. So
absolutely. Just
as an update, this is being discussed on the city side of the house, and I for one see this as progress, because years prior to this we didn't have this number. It wasn't this finite. We weren't able to close in on it. So good work.
Thank you. And I really, really want to thank the city finance staff. Lainey and Dawn and Jason have been extraordinary, helping us get to what do you really need us to tell you, and they've been great coaches and mentors to us.
Okay.
So just really quick on the lines of thanking, actually Director Chenier was the one that asked if we could put a 5-year projection. So so he's the kind of the spearhead on this one. So just wrapping up our slides really quick.
I love this slide.
The County of Sacramento Fund. Oops.
Right.
I guess we don't
Is
have the
that
last-
zero, or what is that?
No, it's just property taxes. It's stable. We
are
know
what
what
they
it
are.
is.
Right.
We know how to budget for it.
It's solid, so we are comfortable with the revenue sources and expenditures.
Yeah. We should have just put a big smiley face.
It certainly saves on the charts, I know that. I don't have any. Okay.
So any additional questions or comments?
Okay, let me ask directors any questions about that. Okay. Yes, Director Frost. Yeah.
On the, I noticed on the county side of it, the county has quite a lot of reserves. And I'm curious to know why haven't been on this board for a while. Why does the county we have more libraries, but we have all these reserves? Is the county just putting more money, has more revenues going into it?
Well, there are a number of factors at work here. Part of it is the county is relatively stable, and for a number of years, and it's only been in the last couple of years that I would say we even have dipped into reserves. During the Great Recession, we did, of course, because property tax revenues were down. But we also I'm trying to think, we don't necessarily, because we try to be prudent, spend everything we get from the county, so that fund balance does build up. And we also require a certain amount of money just to operate, to pay our bills.
Yeah, and if I can add, we've been really prudent in terms of budgeting, and back during the economic downfall, so the fund balance was declining. So over the last, I'd say about 4 years, we've been seeing nice increases, and that reflects the increase in values to property. So in terms of revenue, it's in line with property tax increases, where it's not set and flat, from year to year. So if the housing market goes up, then our property tax revenues will also increase. And so we've seen a nice jump over the last couple of years in terms of property tax receipts.
So in 2020 to 2023, we're showing that we'll have losses on the county side, but in theory, if property values go up, that could zero out or look very different by the time that comes.
And we have gradually been adding staff on the county side, but again, we always worry that another recession is just around the corner. I don't like to think like that, but
it's prudent to think that way.
I think we have to be prudent. So it's that balance of how much fund balance is too much fund balance, and we have looked at using one-time expenditures. That's where the refreshes of the different libraries have come from, which is why we've dipped into the fund balance. So the interior improvements to North Highlands, Arcade, Arden Dimmick, for example, were all used with fund balance.
So this brings me to you mentioned that the average library costs $600,000 a year, and I know we have this dream in Orangevale. And but in Orangevale, we'll be drawing on bond money to fund the capital improvement for the library rather than utilizing fund balance. How do you decipher how that works? Is it just based on what the County Board of Supervisors voted to allocate this bond money for this library, and that's where it goes?
Well, and that goes back to the Joint Powers Authority Agreement and who's responsible for what. So when it comes to the buildings, basically the owning entity is responsible for the structure itself and the HVAC system, and then we're responsible for things like the books and the furniture and the which is why we can paint and sort of make things prettier or add new furniture. So part of it has to do with literally how the joint powers agreement is written. And
so when we draw down on that bond for capital improvement, the monthly payment on that is paid by
the county.
The county or the library authority with county funds.
If it is a county building, I'm going to turn to our legal counsel for
I'm just curious
for his thoughts on this, but because the owning entity is responsible for the structure, I'm 90% sure, I don't have my JPA in front of me, that it would be the owning entity's responsibility to pay for the building, just as the City of Sacramento used bond monies to build the 3 new libraries, and we actually have, I think, 7 other libraries that have some sort of bonds on them, with the exception of Martin Luther King and North Sacramento, which is a leased facility. The owning entity is the one that usually is responsible for the bond payment.
And so this is my last question, sorry everyone. I'm trying to figure out how to get a library in Orangevale. Do you see these numbers, this forecast, as sort of a barrier in any way to, just feeling really good about a project in Orangevale? I mean, does that create a hardship on this budget, given that you're already forecasting, that it's not sustaining, the revenues are not, superseding the expenditures over time?
Well, the good news is Orangevale's in the county. And so to my way of thinking, because the county is so stable, if we can find the money to build a new library in Orangevale, we will figure out how to find the money if we need additional staff to operate it. Because right now we currently have, I think, 3 or 3.5 FTE operating that 4,000 square foot building in Orangevale. If we move to an 8 or 10,000 square foot building, we'll need additional staff, and we'll have to find that. And the good news is there's fund balance that will help us do that.
So it's not a barrier. You don't see.
I don't see it as a barrier. I do not.
It's a matter of finding the right.
I think it's
building that can be repurposed.
Exactly.
Whatever.
I thought I liked what we found, but.
Yeah, I don't want to put. I mean, maybe when you're ready, you can give us an update on that, or we can talk offline.
Okay, we'll talk offline about that. But I don't see that as a barrier because, again, I'm looking back to 2009 and 10. The city built 3 new libraries. We had to open them. We didn't really have the money to do that, and we figured out a way. I mean, we sort of bootstrapped those operations, and I think they're very successful libraries. And all 3 of them are incredibly busy. Everybody said the Robbie Waters Pocket Greenhaven Library would really impact the Bell Coolidge operations, and they would be less busy. They're busier than ever. So when you build libraries, people use them. And I mean, that's just a fact. So
can you just give me a hint that we're moving in the right direction, though?
I think we're moving in the right direction.
The discussions we had and the property we looked at.
I think we're absolutely moving in the right direction, and it's something I would love to see and really count as a success that happened during my tenure here. I look at Rio Linda and think that was a real success because we took nothing and made it into truly a wonderful community space. I believe we can do the same thing for Orangevale. We just have to find the right property. And we have to decide we can do it.
Director Frost, just by way of information, we're not limited on the county side to just property tax revenues. I will just tell you, during my tenure on the Board of Supervisors, there have been a couple of occasions where the board, either through general fund revenues, through the tobacco litigation settlement monies at one time. Another time through the TO funds, made monies available for capital expenditures to either make to coincide with some bond monies that were available and or other monies that have been accumulated through county funding streams to actually make those ventures possible. And so I would just suggest that it may be something we want to visit with the county executive about, because again, as we do our county budget, all they're going to rope off is the property tax revenues that go to the libraries and say, here's the share you get. We have the ability to supplement that for libraries in the unincorporated area and or in the incorporated cities if we choose to. And I would just put that out there that, and you're not shy about the Orangeville Library, neither was your predecessor on the Board of Supervisors. We were in some very tough budget times. I think we're in a point of time where we could look to that, but that's a Board of Supervisors decision to supplement that and to direct it to a particular facility if we choose to. So.
Well, and also, the Orangeville community is receptive to repurposing a building, and in the past, what they've had is plans for a brand new building that was going to cost $10 million. We have $5 million already set aside in bond money we can go tomorrow if we can just find the right property. So, I don't think we're short of money. I think it's a matter of finding the right space. It's just been a challenge. Mm-hmm. But I did want to make sure that these numbers didn't create a problem for your budget if we're opening another library. That was
we are very
kind
creative.
Okay.
We'll figure it out.
Okay,
I promise.
Great.
No, I mean
Thank
it.
you.
I know we can do it. Johnny's like kicking me right now behind the podium, but no, I believe we can do it, and there are many, many ways that we can make that happen. And if nothing else, we are incredibly efficient about how we staff and how we operate and how we use technology. And I think we're learning a lot from the automated material handling system that was Jared's brainchild. That's working very well to help us get materials out to people more quickly. I think we're learning a lot of things.
It means a lot. These communities love their library. They do. They do.
We know.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right,
Thanks.
Director Rivas and Director Ashby. Brian?
Thank you. I just want to clarify my understanding that with regard to the structural deficit, the plan for addressing it is to ask the city for more money to cover it, right?
Because our funding is cost allocated, right? That's where that I know it says 55 39, but I lump in the 5% that we get from rentals and things like that. It's more like 58-42 or 56-44, how it's divided between the city and the county, right? And there's a kind of a hard line between those revenue sources. So on the city side, the deficit, and this is where the challenge is, the deficit is on the city side, and yet what do you say to the library user who may live in the city but uses a county library, or lives in the county and uses a city library? They don't know the difference, and that's one of the challenges that all library systems have. Most or many library systems are districts where the money's all in one pot, but in this case, California's a little bit different, I've learned in my 8 years here, and we have to really have that hard dividing line. So it is the city's responsibility. Those 3 new libraries came from the city. That deficit comes from a combination, the trifecta of issues that, from the Great Recession to building 3 new libraries to the city suffering some great setbacks, all of that. So it has to come from the city.
And if it doesn't, then this board is going to have to look at reducing services.
Correct.
Okay.
And we would have to reduce the services on the city side of the house. There are other complications because the city holds bonds on many of the buildings in the city. So there are only so many libraries that we can look at closing, for example, if it came to that. Instead, we're really pleased that we've shined a light, and Johnny's right. Director Chenier asked for this last year. We presented it, I think, at the December board meeting. This is a tweaked version of what we presented last December, and we will continue to tell this story until we're all on the same page and it's being addressed, and the city is stepping forward. We have 1.5, I think it's 1.25 more this year than we did last year in general fund. That's significant. That goes a long way toward helping us not dip into that fund balance, the existing fund balance. So we're going to keep moving.
Thank you.
Fine. Angelique?
Okay.
So some of this I may just have forgotten. I know you're having
Sorry.
cold, can't hear. Right. But remind me how the other cities besides the city of Sacramento contribute to the library fund.
So the 5 county cities, as we call them, I have to do them in alphabetical order. I always forget one. So it's Elk Grove, Galt, Isleton. Sorry, Citrus Heights, Elk Grove, Galt, Isleton, and Rancho Cordova. They turn over a portion of their revenues that are sort of equal to what the county's portion is. And we operate those libraries from those revenues.
And does the county funding in part go to any library other than libraries in unincorporated parts of the county?
The county funding is all kind of a big pot. I mean, what Elk Grove contributes goes into Fund 201, which is our county revenue fund.
Does the county subsidize the other cities?
No.
Libraries.
So if you separated out Elk Grove, they would pay for their own libraries, there would be no gap. If Rancho Cordova was separated out, they would be able to pay for their own library without any gap. Galt would be able to pay for their own library without any gap. Let me get to the bottom.
I'm deferring to the smart guy to my right.
Let me get to the bottom line of the point of frustration. The city of Sacramento does not get a subsidy from the county, and the county's running a $25 million annual fund balance, and they do collect taxes from city homes. So you all that live in the city, you do pay your taxes to the county. The funding source for the county is property tax revenue. It does include City of Sac residents, and on top of that, City of Sac residents are doing X and B and a general fund allocation. So there's a constant source of frustration for me that I think the county ought to be helping the library branches inside the city of Sacramento as well, as opposed to sitting on 25 million while we're looking at a 1.8 gap. So just moving forward, if we're going to start talking about this balance of where funding goes and comes from and how the subsidies work, I don't think it's fair to think of the people in the city of Sacramento as not being in the county of Sacramento, because they are, and they're already contributing in every way. In fact, they contribute into the fund that is the Sac County Fund that doesn't support their libraries, but rather supports Elk Grove, Galt, Rancho Cordova, Isleton, and Citrus Heights, right? So I just think that's something to consider as well.
I think we hear you, because we look at the cost allocation study, and I look at it from the point of view of being, a librarian. Everybody uses everything, and at the end of the day, it all evens out. We share. Our collections are shared. Much of our staffing is shared. Christy, who did that incredible presentation on summer reading, is a shared resource. I am all for us looking at every option we can and sitting down with the people who can truly make those decisions, well, which includes all of you and perhaps Mr. Gill. I'm all for sitting down and looking at, is this the right way to do this? This JPA was created in 1993. Is it time to rethink our structure? There's a part of me that says let the sleeping baby sleep, and there's a part of me that says, we have to build a sustainable future for the library, because
Well, just when I was asked to carry Measure B for this board, and I did it, and it was a new tax, and it was gap funding, we talked about this item, and Jimmy and I sat on a committee, and he was the one who was willing to have a conversation around the county being more supportive of the city, and there were other members that had some questions, and at the end of the day, it was such an urgent need that we had to sort of shelf it. And I'm just suggesting that perhaps it's time to unshelf that and have the dialogue.
We'll make sure this is noted in the action summary, and we will. I would love a small group to work on this, because I think it's time.
Okay, Supervisor or Director Frost.
I've never heard the answer to Director Ashby's question, though. Does the county subsidize? Does each of those cities pay for their libraries, or does the county subsidize them and not subsidize Sacramento City? I didn't hear the answer to the question.
Go ahead, because it's a good question.
It is a good question.
So the county revenue sources comes from property tax revenues, and so it's all the unincorporated areas of the county and the 5 cities that Rivka mentioned. So that money goes into the county fund. We call it the county Sacramento County Fund. So property tax revenue for the library portion for the city, I believe, goes to the city, and it's part of their general fund contribution. So it's not, and we don't get an itemized breakdown per city, per county, and so forth. So the money comes in and it goes into one fund. So we don't really get an itemized amount per cities.
And if I just could add, 3 of those cities have revenue neutrality agreements that relate to property tax. Libraries are touched upon in those agreements as well. Obviously, there's a repayment to the county. There was, considerations. Some of those will go away. They all will go away over time. But libraries were considered as part of that. And I just would add that Galt and Isleton pre-existed, obviously, along with Folsom. Folsom was not a part of the system, chose to do their own library. And Galt and Isleton were small portions of that, but were part of that blended piece pre-93, part of the original agreement. Subsequent to that, obviously, the other 3 cities were formed, and so I don't know how it's reflected. Again, I don't think this question has been raised before. Certainly, it's a fair question, but it's one that I don't think there's any particular breakdown. But I think you look where some of the growth has occurred. Obviously, it's been in 2 of the 3 cities relative to additional property tax. Same citrus highs, certainly in the city of Sacramento with growth, but. I didn't want to interrupt. I just want to tell you that there's a lot of history behind the formation of that, and things have happened since then. Obviously, both in the city of Sacramento, but in the other cities, and certainly in the unincorporated areas.
So given the fact that JPA agreement, revenue neutrality, some of the cities actually have libraries that have no bonding, so their debt is lower. I would like to see the numbers, and I would like to see how the numbers shake out to see that all the cities are treated fairly. They should be. Sacramento should be treated the same, but we can't really look at that unless we see those numbers. We can't really see the whole picture unless we look at the whole picture.
We'll do our best to get them for you. But it's going to probably take us a while because we're going to have to sit down with the city managers of each of the cities.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Director Scheer?
Yeah, I'm just going to make a suggestion. I appreciate that from Director Frost. I'd like to see maybe we can take a budget committee meeting and, number one, help frame the questions, because it is pretty complicated, and set some parameters around the discussion of kind of equal treatment for all of the cities, whether it's Sacramento or one of the smaller cities. And understanding, Johnny, that's going to take some work, because right now, and I think going back to some of the history, since we have our institutional memory sitting here, about how these funding arrangements developed and where they are today. So I'd like to see we have a budget committee. I think it's appropriate for us to help kind of frame that discussion and then bring it back to the board as a whole.
Okay. Good questions. I think one other important piece at the time of the formation, and related to obviously to merging your respective staffs that were either city and or county staffs and labor agreements, and obviously over time that has that occurred with the blending, but that was a piece of it too, because of obligations that were part of the labor pool, let alone the buildings and or facilities, whether they were leased or owned, so it may take you a bit of time to pull all that together. So, but
I think that the labor part of it finally,
Yep.
I think we're at a staffing level where we're all SPL, but maybe not.
I think we can
former
ask
county
our budget
employees.
folks who have been working with you anyway to help out on that as well.
Say it again. I'm sorry.
We can ask Lainey to participate in that and provide some support. I think that she could do that very well.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay,
great.
on that,
Thank you for your incredible interest in the great questions. It's very exciting.
we'll be seeing more of you and Johnny on this topic, I'm sure. So.
Well, fortunately, I kind of like him, so it's good. All right, now we actually need to tell you a little bit about our final budget.
Okay. very
Sorry.
quickly. You had a motion, so you're going to lose a couple of members here quickly. So can you do it? Can you do it in 1 minute?
Chair Natoli, this was an information item that was part of the budget.
Oh, okay. So the.
I thought it was an action.
So action. What was
No.
the action item?
Okay, so the 5-year forecast was an attachment to the budget, and the budget itself is the action item.
Okay. So and we had them in a different order than what you planned to do it, and we're going to lose members here in just a moment.
Right.
So
Okay.
So give us
Here's the
condensed version.
30,000-foot view of our final budget.
Okay.
There is a difference, as you will see on page 2. We're asking for a net increase of $71,000 over the budget that we presented to you in May. And that $71,000 includes, I can't read your writing, go ahead.
So that 71,000, it's a net of some salary savings in light of some position vacancies, and a $200,000 book increase, and an increase to services and supplies. So the net increase that we are recommending is $71,000. Revenue-wise, no changes there, so we're comfortable with the numbers that you adopted back in May.
Okay. Anything else you need to add?
The budget includes $1 million for the Sylvan Oaks Library interior refresh, $200,000 set aside for other deferred maintenance. We're still hoping for funding to refresh Martin Luther King Library in time for its 50th anniversary of being named the Martin Luther King Library. No changes to our position control. We did, after the July meeting, go back and look at how we could figure out how to add a half-time librarian to do more of the gaming workshops that Chris Durr from Walnut Grove showed you. We were able to do that. He'll be on a special assignment working with school districts around the county, the city and the county, to introduce gaming, game development and game design to kids. And so far, I know we've reached out to Natomas Unified and I believe Twin Rivers. So we're, again, trying to do that. So there's no net change to the number of positions. We're just reallocating staff. No changes recommended to our fine and fee schedule. You've heard all of the challenges, including the 5-year forecast for the city and the CalPERS contribution rate increase, and of course, good old inflation.
Okay.
So
Thank
if you
you.
have questions,
Okay,
we'd
let me
be
add-
happy to answer them.
All right. Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks, Johnny. Any questions that we do? I don't see anybody punched up. We do have a motion and a second. We ask any member of the audience wish to address the budget presentation or any comments on that. I have no one signed up to speak.
Excuse me, Chair Natoli, could you tell me who made the motion and the
Yes,
second? Chenier
Chenier
Ashby.
Ashby.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. I was going to announce that in just a moment, but forgot it. I know. Okay, very good. So if there's nothing further on the budget, let's go for a voice vote. All those in favor? Roger, aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Recusals? None? It's unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. Okay. I know we're going to lose a couple members. We do have a couple of adjournments, and I don't know if there's anything else. Board member comments before we get to those? Reports, ideas, questions from board members? All right, seeing none. We'll note that the next meeting will be October 26th in these chambers, again, scheduled for 3 o'clock start. And before we close this meeting, though, if you'll bear with me just for a moment, I'm going to ask that we adjourn in memory of 2 longtime associates of the library in different ways. One was Alan Oshima, who passed away earlier this summer at the age of 78. He was very instrumental in the design of several libraries for the Sacramento Public Library, including the Bell Coolidge facility, Colonial Heights, Del Paso, and Southgate libraries. He was a graduate of UC Berkeley with a degree in architecture. In addition to obviously his architectural talents and the work that he did for this library, did work in other public facilities and was known to members of this board, I'm sure. He was active in many civic organizations and was a lifelong resident of Sacramento, born, raised here, attended Len Park Elementary School, California Middle School, and was a graduate of McClatchy High School. And Alan and his firm, again, did much work for the public libraries in our community. The other person we will be asked to adjourn in memory of is someone who was familiar, I know to certainly folks in Elk Grove and South County, but anybody who had been affiliated with libraries for any bit of time. That was Olga Beatty. Olga was a long time resident of Elk Grove. She passed away just a little over a month ago at the age of 93. One of her many contributions was one of the parties who was the founding member and actually the catalyst for the founding of the Elk Grove Friends of the Library many years ago. She was a part of the Elk Grove Mothers Club, which was the organization that helped start the Elk Grove Western Festival. Very active in local politics. Certainly her viewpoints were very well known. She was a member of the South Sacramento Democratic Club and also Elk Grove Book Club. In 1964, one of the things that she was broke the glass ceiling on, she ran for and won a seat on the Elk Grove Unified School District Board. Became the first woman to do so. Served a very distinguished period of time on that board. She was a teacher, taught at Joseph Kerr Middle School, and was recognized in the Elk Grove community as Elk Grove Citizen of the Year in 1993. She traveled extensively in addition to her community involvement. I know was a friend to folks on this board, and her husband passed away in 2011, and he also was an avid supporter of the libraries. And so with obviously much sadness, but certainly we can celebrate the lives of these two folks who in different ways, but in very important ways, contributed to the development and the support for libraries in our community. And I don't know if anybody else wanted to add anything. Members of this board knew Olga and certainly Alan. And so unless there's anything else you want to add, Rivka, with that, we celebrate the lives of these two wonderful people, and we'll adjourn this meeting in memory of Olga Beatty and Alan Oshima.